Welcome to this Legal Aid New South Wales webinar, Understanding Elder Abuse. My name is Bridget Barker and I'm from the Community Legal Education branch in Legal Aid New South Wales. Before I hand over to our panel for you to meet them, I want to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on whose land we are broadcasting from today. For me, that's the land of the Widjabul-Waible people of the Bundjalung Nation. I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining the webinar today or viewing the recording. I'll now hand over to Deb Tipper, Consultant, Human and Community Services. Thank you, Deb.
Thanks, Bridget, and good afternoon to everyone and welcome. The webinar today results from an exciting and important collaboration between the Elder Abuse Unit of Legal Aid New South Wales and the Central Coast Domestic Violence Court Support and Advocacy Service. It's the first of two collaborative events that we're hosting. The second one will be a free in-person practice forum to be held in September for frontline workers on the Central Coast and surrounds. Unfortunately, this face-to-face forum has been delayed several times because of COVID. And because of those delays, we decided to use the fact that today is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day to offer this webinar. Before I continue, I'd also like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the lands we meet on today across New South Wales and Victoria and recognise their continuing connections to the lands, waters and culture. I'd like to pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging and extend my respects to any Aboriginal people who are participating here today. Today's webinar aims to assist workers to better understand and identify elder abuse in our community. It's a complex issue which is often hidden, and those affected may not feel that they have the freedom to speak out about it, resulting in an underreporting of the issue. That the perpetrators are often family members and commonly children challenges a parent's love and loyalty. And this situation also challenges workers in their roles and their attempts to keep older people safe. The webinar takes the form of, we'll have two introductory presenters, followed by a facilitated discussion involving a panel of 4 or 5 workers from 4 disciplines who are responding to a particular case study. Through this webinar, we're aiming to provide the following: information to improve your understanding of elder abuse and how to identify it, some ideas as to how to respond to your suspicions or knowledge of elder abuse, and insight into how different professional workers might respond to certain circumstances. At the end of the webinar, there'll be some time to answer as many of the questions you have as we can. As time is tight today, we ask you to use the chat facility to submit any questions, comments or suggestions. You can also use this function to identify any challenges you already have in your work in relation to elder abuse or areas you would like more information about. We will be using this information to tailor our September forum to meet some of those needs. We'll be following up this webinar with an email, which, as Bridget said, with short evaluation survey, some links to resources to assist you build on the information from today, the link to the recording of today's webinar, and the link to book a place to the free September practice forum to be held at Mingara Club on the Central Coast on Tuesday, 27th of September. Places are limited in this particular forum, so please register sooner rather than later. I'd now like to welcome and introduce Vicky Parry to provide an acknowledgement of country and to speak about the importance of cultural considerations when working with older First Nations people. Vicky's the Executive Director of Barang Regional Alliance and the co-chair of New South Wales Coalition of Regional Alliance. Vicky's a proud Gomeroi woman from Moree, New South Wales, who moved to New South Wales when she was young. She's also the current chairperson of Yeren Eleanor Duncan Aboriginal Health Services. And I'd like to welcome Vicky and thank her for her participation.
Thanks, Deb. Well, I don't have to introduce myself because Deb's just done all that for me. And I just want to say thank you for inviting me along to be a part of this process, because, you know, we don't often get asked along when it comes to Aboriginal people to have some input or even to provide the acknowledgement. So thank you very much for the opportunity. As Deb said, I am the Executive Director of Barang Regional Alliance, a co-chair of the New South Wales Coalition of Aboriginal Regional Alliances, and have held the position of the chairperson at Yarra and Eleanor Duncan Aboriginal Health Services, I think, for over eight years. I would like to acknowledge the beautiful lands of the Darkinjung people on which I come to you today, and also acknowledge the Aboriginal lands that you are from. I pay my respects to these lands that forever provide for us. I pay my respects to the ancestors that walked and managed these lands, seas and waterways for generations before us. I acknowledge and pay respect to our elders, who are our knowledge holders, teachers and our heroes. I acknowledge our youth, who are our hope for a brighter and stronger future, and who will one day be our leaders. I would also like to acknowledge and recognise all Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people that are in the webinar today. So I've been asked to say a little bit about Aboriginal elder abuse. And I was thinking, why do I get myself into these situations? You know, what do I have to offer around, you know, elder abuse in our communities? And then I actually sat back. I come from a background of working with my community, for my Aboriginal community, through education, employment, housing, and young people. And when I thought about it, I realised that I do have something to offer. I do have something to say about elder abuse. Throughout my life, I have been taught to respect our elders. As Aboriginal people, we are caring, we are giving. If we've got it, we share it with our family and our friends. This is part of our culture, even in today's communities. The cultural obligations and circumstances of grandparents in many Aboriginal communities are significant factors to consider when responding to abuse of older people, particularly in relation to now I always get this word wrong, reciprocity, where resources and family responsibilities such as parenting are shared, and kinship, where the family relationships and responsibilities extend outside the family. The changing role of elders and kinship members may complicate the way which abuse is experienced and understood in the community. Previous negative experiences with welfare and justice systems have also led many Aboriginal people to mistrust government agencies, which in turn affect their willingness to or confidence in reporting abuse or seeking help. In addition, factors to consider with abuse of older Aboriginal people is that life expectancy is substantially lower than for non-Aboriginal people. In general, we would consider a lower age, such as 50+ years, as older for Aboriginal people, rather than generally applied 65+ years for non-Aboriginal people. Agencies working with Aboriginal communities need to recognise and involve Aboriginal elders, Aboriginal people and respected community members and Aboriginal community controlled organisations in developing education, information and responses to abuse of older Aboriginal people. So some of the stats that was, you know, in New South Wales or in the 2016 census, among Indigenous Australians aged 50 and over was 91%. So that are identified as being Aboriginal origin only. So that was something like 113,000 Aboriginal people. 6% identified as being Torres Strait Islander origin only. And 3% were both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. In New South Wales, had the highest population of Aboriginal Australians aged 50 plus, with 35%, which is 43,686. And then Queensland was the next state. So I actually had an opportunity earlier this year to meet with the Ombudsman around elder abuse in our communities, and just to have to feed back what was the best way, what should they be doing to work with our communities. And I had the opportunity, and I was going to send it off to Deb, but it ran out of time. But the Kimberley's Community Legal Centre worked with the Kimberley Jagaeus, which means birds, community, to actually develop a bit of understanding around no more humbugging. Humbugging was a result of that work. So it's a little bit of a video animated clip, and people may have seen it before, but I encourage you to have a look at that. And just the, working with that community and being able to come with a resource that they developed that's actually making a difference in that community and has been successful. So, I mean, I don't know whether we'll have the opportunity down the track to look at that for New South Wales, but I think it's really important that type, or we talk to the communities around what is actually needed. So, humbugging is an Aboriginal term used in the Kimberley to describe when someone demands money that belongs to someone else with no intentions of repaying it. Resource sharing is a cultural practice commonly seen among Aboriginal people. However, humbugging usually has a negative connotation. It is used to describe demands that are repeated, often with the threat of actual physical, emotional, and psychological abuse. If the person refuses, sometimes the term is used to describe outright theft. For example, when somebody uses another person's bank cards, centre pay arrangements without their permission. And I do have a link to that. It's on YouTube. So if people wanted to have a look at it, I'll send it to Deb later if I have the opportunity. But one of the things, I've worked across government in a number of roles throughout the years, and when I set my mind to trying to remember what had happened, I worked with Housing New South Wales on the Central Coast, and I was the client Aboriginal coordinator, Aboriginal Housing Services for Central Coast, and I had an elderly Aboriginal woman that was living on the coast in a complex. She had recently lost her partner, so it was only a one-bedroom apartment that she was living in. But it took a good 8 to 10 months before it was identified through, the issues with tenancy, being behind in the rent, but going to hospital, that we actually identified. A senior client service officer came to me and said, we've got some concerns about this particular client. And when we looked into it, the husband had passed, or the partner had passed away. She had an intellectual disability. Her family, she brought her family in to support her through the funeral arrangement. Yes. Sorry, I didn't say clap. But, the moral is that
Unfortunately, Vicky, we seem to have lost sound from you.
Havik, can you hear me?
I think, Deb, Vicky's experiencing some technical issues at her end with the internet.
Sorry about that. I will follow up with some of those references that Vicky has provided to us, or will provide to me. We can follow that up with an email later on. Yeah, look, sorry, Vic, that'll have to finish there. I think she had a short time to go, but I think what we see there is there's a lot of complexities to working with older Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people. I'd now like to introduce Aloma Fennell, who'll speak about discrimination against older people from an international perspective. Aloma is currently an Australian representative on the International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, a steering group member of both the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older Persons and the Equality Rights Alliance. Previously, Aloma was the first woman to be the chair of the board of the largest educational institution in Australia, Sydney Institute of Technology, and the first woman to be the national president of the Australian Institute of Training and Development. She's also the immediate past president of the National Older Women's Network. Welcome, Aloma, and thank you as well.
Yeah.
We've got you now, Aloma.
We've got you now, Aloma.
Okay, good. Right. So, Gareth, I think you mentioned Gareth, did you, Deb? The Global Alliance? Yeah, good. Okay, very important. Okay, so elder abuse. I mean, elder abuse is worldwide, and what's important for me is that the International Network, INPEA, International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, has recently nominated me and given me the position of Australian representative for INPEA. So I feel really quite honoured to have that. And it's going to change a lot of things that I'm doing and how I'm doing them. So worldwide, to just give you some information, you can put your hands up and say, I've had enough when you've had enough. Worldwide, around 1 in 6 people 60 years and older have experienced some form of abuse in community settings during the past year. The World Health Organization believes that most developed world countries characterize old age starting at 60 or above. However, this definition is not applicable to a place like Africa when you're taking a global view. This is. So in Africa, where the more traditional definition of an elder or elderly person starts at 50 years of age. So interesting when we start to talk about older people. So rates of elder abuse are quite high in institutions such as nursing homes, and we have a problem with, I have a major problem with that title of nursing homes, because what you find in nursing homes is very few qualified nurses in them. They're very high there, and it can lead to very serious physical injuries and long-term psychological consequences. Worldwide, women exiting a violent relationship find significant barriers to suitable accommodation, particularly around stability, privacy, and security. So there are issues that apply here as well as everywhere else. The past decade in Australia, we have seen a renewed interest in renewed policy interest in access to justice for women. In turn, this has highlighted the need for evidence-based research on the legal needs of socially and economically disadvantaged groups. We're not necessarily seeing this. Older persons or people over the age of 65 have been recognised as distinctly burdened group who are vulnerable to substantial legal problems with adverse impacts on their life circumstances, yet legal needs of this group remain largely unmet. hidden from legal service providers and complaint handling bodies. Clearly, there needs to be further targeted empirical research to identify the substantive reasons why older people, particularly older women, do not currently enjoy equality before the law. In most countries, older people suffer a distinct disadvantage in access to justice. So while not currently proven in terms of the prevalence or incidence of legal problems, the evidence does show that older people face particularly strong barriers to gaining legal assistance and achieving satisfactory resolutions. There needs to be further targeted global empirical research to identify the substantive reasons why older people do not currently enjoy equality before the law. We need to know whether older people are locked out by the legal system itself that fails to recognise their needs, or whether their absence is the exercise of conscious choice. And this we need to, or a combination of some of those and other factors. I'll leave it there. I could go on, as you can probably tell, and would, but I won't. Other people would like to step in. I'm happy to answer any questions. Over to you, Deb.
Thanks very much, Aloma. And if people have got questions, please put them into the panel and we can make sure, we'll try and answer them later or follow up with an email and things. And I've had contact with Vicky and she, the whole thing was frozen from her end and she apologises. So thank you, Aloma. And, you're a busy woman today, I understand. You've got several other things to do given your various roles. So thanks for that.
Yeah.
I'd now like to...
I'll just say this one piece that I really should have said at the beginning. So, the heart of a society by the way in which it treats its most vulnerable. And I think that's critical for all of us. While it takes a village to raise a child, it also takes a village to respect its elders. And that's all of us, older persons. Okay, I'll leave it there. I could go on. My husband arms at me like, I've left something out or I've done something.
Yeah. Well said, and thanks very much, Aloma. And thanks to Garth for sort of helping along the way with the tech side of things.
All right. Yeah. I'll just say this is what he's trying to tell me. We did get something yesterday to say that we shouldn't really be using the terminology elder abuse anymore. And is that correct, Garth? That's what we got. We get that from the Attorney General, I think. Yeah, we did indeed. Yeah. Okay, he's throwing it at me now. Yeah, so elder abuse. So what is it actually when we're talking about it? It's a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring within a relationship where there is an expectation of trust, which causes harm or distress to an older person. And I will come to the national plan. There is a new national plan, which you may be aware of, to respond to abuse of older Australians. So this is important, the abuse of older Australians instead of elder abuse. And that's the terminology we should now be using. But this is what has come out. Stop using elder abuse and refer to abuse of older Australians. More to the point, actually, in a way. So I'll leave that with you.
Okay, we'll throw that out. That's obviously a point of discussion and consideration. So thanks very much, Aloma. I'd now like to welcome Jenny Henstock. Jenny will be our panel facilitator, and Jenny's worked with Legal Aid New South Wales for many years and is currently working in a project officer role with the Elder Abuse Service. She's passionate about working collaboratively with colleagues and other services to ensure good outcomes for clients. I'd like to acknowledge the huge amount of work that Jenny's offered us and done to help make today happen. So over to you, Jenny, and thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Deb. And thank you to our wonderful speakers so far. It's been a really, really informative session. I'm going to introduce you to our amazing panel today. We are really lucky to be joined by some really valuable community workers today to workshop our elder abuse case study and hopefully bring a little bit more of an understanding to, you know, how elder abuse can actually present itself. I'm going to start today by introducing you to Senior Constable Terry Sutcliffe from the New South Wales Police Force. Terry's worked with the New South Wales Police Force for 8 years. She's worked primarily in general duties as a police officer, but has also undertaken training as a domestic violence liaison officer. Terry is currently working as an ACPO, and that is an aged crime prevention officer, as she feels there is a great need to protect, connect, educate, and be educated by vulnerable communities. And she feels that as an ACPO, she's able to do this. Terry's joined by Senior Constable Alana Kelly from the New South Wales Police also. Alana has a background working with vulnerable clients, including working as a youth worker, a teacher, and in child protection before joining the New South Wales Police Force over 10 years ago. Alana is currently working as an aged crime prevention officer also with the Newcastle City Police District. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Nicole Viana, and she is a family and domestic violence vulnerable persons worker. For the past 15 years, Nicole has worked with women, children and youth in the child protection and domestic violence sector on the Central Coast. Nicole is currently working with the Central Coast DV CAS service as a family and domestic violence vulnerable persons worker, where she supports women experiencing family and domestic violence to navigate their journey through the New South Wales justice system, whilst also addressing their social and welfare-based needs. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Mary Lovelock. And Mary Lovelock is the Senior Solicitor of the Legal Aid New South Wales Elder Abuse Service. Mary has worked in senior positions across the Civil Law Division of Legal Aid New South Wales since 2007. She is a member of the New South Wales Law Society Elder Law and Succession Committee, and she has previous experience in private practice and working for the New South Wales Nurses Association, which drew on her previous work as a registered nurse. Mary has always been interested in the intersection between health and the law, and she's drawn on her work in health and law to set up the Legal Aid New South Wales Elder Abuse Service in 2019. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to Simone Hornell, who is a senior clinician, elder abuse, with the Older Persons Mental Health Service. So Simone is a social worker with 22 years of experience and is currently the Senior Clinician Elder Abuse with the Older Persons Mental Health Service with the Central Coast Local Health District. This role supports mental health clinicians to respond to clients who are experiencing or at risk of elder abuse, to work towards positive psychological outcomes so that they can ultimately live safely and with dignity in the community. So thank you once again to all of our panel for giving us your time today, and we really do appreciate it. What we're going to be doing today is that we're going to be working a case study, and we've called our client or our person, Anita, today. I'm going to read this case study and I'll ask Bridget to share the slide with the case study on it. We hope that you've had the opportunity to be able to read this case study in advance, but we're going to go through it again now. So Anita is a woman in her late 60s living on the Central Coast. Anita's son Kevin has been living in her home with her for a number of years. Anita receives an aged pension but has no other income. She has a minor disability but is otherwise fairly independent and self-sufficient. Kevin receives a carer's pension but does not provide his mother with any real care or domestic support. Anita originally asked her son to move in with her because she recognised he had a substance abuse problem and thought that he could recover with her help. Kevin has continued to use drugs, and lately he's been abusing Anita verbally and psychologically, taking or misusing her possessions and isolating her socially. Kevin does not assist with the housework and does not contribute to the costs of the household. Anita's quality of life has suffered and she's become depressed and fearful of her son. Neighbours have recently reported Kevin to the police as a result of witnessing Kevin verbally abuse his mother. This morning, on the way, the neighbours reported Kevin to the police this morning, and police were called out to attend Anita's household. On the way to the call out to Anita's house, police became aware that there have been 2 previous incidents that police have had to attend at Anita's home due to Kevin's behaviour towards her. So obviously from this case study, there's a few things that kind of jump right out at us. And obviously Kevin is receiving a carer's pension, but he's not providing care. There's verbal and psychological abuse, serious enough for neighbours to contact the police. And Anita's becoming socially isolated. And this is a risk factor that we know about elder abuse. And it also makes it much harder for Anita to actually seek help or speak up about her circumstances. So we've had the police called out to attend Anita's home. I'm going to turn to both Terry and Alana now and ask you to let us know what you would do when you have been called out to a circumstance like this, please.
Okay, so as first responders, we would go to the house and, as you've heard, we find out what other circumstances have happened before, and if they've got firearms, if there are any current ABOs. In this case, there isn't any current ABOs, so we would just have to speak to Anita and find out what's happening in the home. If she doesn't talk to us, we'd also go and talk to the neighbours and find out, as they're the ones that have called us, we would find out what they what they've heard and what they're seeing. We'd ask them things like, has Anita's appearance changed? Is she becoming more withdrawn from talking to them, whereas maybe before she wasn't? Then obviously looking around the house, inside the house, is it neat and tidy or is it messy? Does she have food? Does she have access to her funds still, or is Kevin taken over her payments from her pension? Also, what are her fears? They're saying that she's got fears. What are those fears? So is she scared that he's going to physically assault her, or is she fearful that the verbal abuse and psychological abuse is going to continue and it's going to cause her more mental harm? We'd also be asking things like, I just lost train of thought. Like, is he controlling, or there's a certain amount of questions we have to ask when doing a domestic violence incident. So they're called DV-SAT questions, where it gives us a risk rating to be able to give if they're at serious threat, which then refers to WDV-CAS. They get that risk rating as well. And if they get 12 or more answers they answer yes to, they automatically get a serious threat and they get put on our SAMS agenda, which is the I can't even think now. It's a meeting held with other agencies where we can discuss what we can do to help them live in their home safely.
If they don't meet the threshold, you can have them mentioned as well at that meeting. So all the other stakeholders can also provide assistance. So if they don't meet the threshold, when they don't meet those questions, if they haven't answered yes for 12 or more of those questions, but we still have concerns, we can ask for their matter to be mentioned, which is very helpful as well, because there could be families that might be reluctant to tell us the correct or true answer to those questions, as a fear of the loved one getting into trouble a lot more, because some of the questions are quite intimate, talking about strangulation and things like that. Some people might not disclose that on the first instance. So if we still have some concerns, we can have their matters mentioned. They don't necessarily have to meet that 12 yes answers threshold.
Can I ask a question, Terry and Alana? If you are identifying or getting 12 questions answered by positively by the client or person, do you need to have consent to be referred to these SAMS meetings? Or
So
is this...
they give consent when I believe when they bring WDV CAS rooms, is that right, Nicole? They give you guys consent to be on this meeting, onto the SAMS meeting. But I don't think they have to give consent.
It's an automatic.
It's an automatic. They're on it, but
Yes, so if we speak to them, we assume they're consented to that meeting, and then we'll put them forward to the SAM.
Yeah.
And can I ask you...
Go. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you said that there are certain things that you, when you've been called out to a situation, that you have cues that might kind of raise some red buttons or red flags, sorry, about whether that person's at risk of elder abuse. Are there certain things that people going into an older person's home should maybe turn their mind to? I think you said, do they have any food? So obviously if there's no food in the fridge, that might be kind of a red flag. Are there other things, apart from changes in appearance and perhaps, you know, obvious signs of physical abuse, that you would kind of look out for in a home when you're being called out?
So if they're a regular at the home, say if the neighbours have been in the home prior to Kevin attending in this case, prior to him living in there, and the house was normally orderly and, you know, it was vacuumed and quite neat and tidy, and now all of a sudden, you know, it's unvacuumed, that all of his stuff has been moved into the main living areas and maybe she's been confined to one room. I would say looking for things like that. Yeah, just things that aren't normal for the elderly person in their living situation that may have, prior to the son moving in, may have been normal, would be my suggestion. Yeah.
I'm supposing things like dishevelled appearance, you know, soiled clothing or soiled bed sheets or piles of, you know, unopened mail and things.
Multiple letters in the letterbox. Like,
yeah.
I know it sounds really minor, but you think, okay, well, why aren't they coming outside to collect that though? It's a very minor thing, or even unkept yards as well.
Yeah. Missing their hair appointments. So if they went to their hairdresser every other week and now all of a sudden they've stopped. Things like that can raise a couple of red flags that may not be normal for this person. Knowing what people do is always a good thing, and knowing their habits and routines is a good thing, I think, especially in elder abuse.
We've got a really good question here, and I hope it's okay if I interrupt you with this. But we've got a question here from Linda, who, and this raises a really important question, and I know that coming from a legal service, we always need to turn our mind to this type of thing as well. Linda says that in this case study, how would you handle the situation if Kevin was at the house when you went to investigate or to speak to Anita? So what do you do to make sure that you're not aggravating the situation?
I think, before we answer it, a lot of the time it wouldn't be necessarily us responding first. It would be general duties. So it would just depend in the circumstances if we responded or if general duties responded. You'd obviously want to speak to them separately. That would be probably the most important thing, and it would really be dependent on his behaviour and attitude towards us when we arrived. Also,
yeah, if he's quite agitated and things like that, we wouldn't separate from each other and go speak to him. We'd probably try and ask him to come outside and speak to us separately, and then if he
possibly get another car crew.
And then, yeah, and try and separate them. So maybe remove one from the house and have a chat with them outside, and the other person's inside the house would be our main goal, is to try and separate and speak to them individually. So Anita, for example, might be intimidated in telling us if Kevin's there. So we would, yeah, separate and try and get her to talk to us independently, so she's not under the influence of him.
Okay, and are there any other things that you would be turning your mind to? If you did establish, you have mentioned that you would refer to WDV CAS, which is fantastic, or DV CAS, I beg your pardon. Are there other things that you would be thinking about kind of on that call out? We've had 2 call outs before, so this is the 3rd call out that you would be thinking about actioning straight away.
Yeah, so I'd be looking into possibly an AVO to protect her. I'm not sure. It depends on what happens in those the other 2 circumstances, what conditions we'd be applying for. Yeah, it would definitely. We do have probably the threshold in this case with 2 other incidents to apply for an AVO, which is what I would be looking at minimum. And then obviously if there's more to it and she discloses other offences, probably charges, but it really depends on what she discloses at the time.
Okay, so Terry and Alana, you've been called out and you've identified that there is this real risk that Anita is experiencing elder abuse. And so at this point, after you've considered the AVO, would you then what services would you refer that client to get ongoing assistance from, or further assistance from?
Like we said before, she gets the automatic referral from our computer system to DV CAS now, and then they've got the services to link her into on top of that. As general duties officers, we probably wouldn't be linking her into any services, but because she's come up a few times as a victim, us as age crime prevention officers would probably be starting to look at, does she have the help going into the home?
Yep. Has she had an ACAT assessment done? What sort of services are already in place? If none, then that's when we start looking at, okay, should we contact the legal aid elder abuse service? Should we contact health? Should we contact other services that could assist her, I guess? And also it's sort of, in a way, it's educating her to say, well, this isn't right, what Kevin is doing, because a lot of the victims you find are in complete denial and they think this is normal behaviour and it's their son, so they want to protect them and keep them safe, but at the detriment of them and their life. So I guess sort of saying, no, this is not right, and speaking up and making it very clear that you are being treated terribly and this is not right. So.
Yeah, I think that we've heard about some of those barriers to older people kind of seeking help, and obviously being a parent of the person that you have raised and have protected for such a long time, it is hard to speak up if they have become an abuser in their adult life. So I might now ask, unless you've got anything to add, Terry and Alana, I might ask if we can speak to Nicole, because she is our representative of the Domestic Violence Advocacy Service. And you did mention that we have an automatic referral to her service. So Nicole, if you received a referral like this from the service, what would you do to address, what would you do first to start to support Anita? You're on mute, Nicole.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah, you kept muting me. Okay, thanks, Jenny. What I'll do, I'll just give a brief overview of what we do at DV CAS. So we are actually co-located at Gosford and Wyong local courts, and we have safe rooms in each court, and we have an office based in Wyong. We receive the majority of our referrals from police across Brisbane Waters and Tuggerah Lakes LACs, local area commands. We assist women with information around the AVOs, hearings, advocacy with police, safety planning, and we provide referrals to housing, counselling, DV, legal and health services, to name a few. We also work closely with the Elder Service at Legal Aid, Domestic Violence Unit and the DV duty scheme solicitors who provide legal advice for AVOs, financials, family law, immigration and so on. We don't case manage, but we do case coordinate through the safety action meetings known as SAMs, as Terry and Alana were talking about. So at SAMs, we assist victims who are at serious threat and risk from their perpetrator. And these fortnightly meetings are run by police and have created a safer pathway for victims to receive support to mitigate risks. So my role includes supporting elderly clients who are experiencing domestic and family violence from partners, family members or their carers. We consider Aboriginal women over the age of 50 and non-Aboriginal women over the age of 65 to be elderly. So over the last 12 months, we've actually supported 190 elderly clients, and these referrals were mainly received from police, although we do receive external referrals from health, government, non-government agencies, and adult children not living in the home, but most of our referrals are actually from police. So once we do receive a referral from police, we'll contact the client by phone. So I might refer now to the perpetrator as a person of interest or the POI. So to help us identify immediate risks, we'll try to find out from our elderly client, you know, is she safe? Where is the POI? Who is the POI to her? Is she independent? Does she rely on the POI financially or for daily care? And who else is in the home? And also, you know, are there any other family members outside the home who are safe and supportive? And what services are supporting her at the moment? So we'll provide as much information as we can to help her understand her rights to keep her safe. And we always encourage her to report to police. So if we can, we will talk about referrals and discuss services who may be able to offer support. And in the case of Anita, we would really offer information about victim services and help her make those applications if needed for counselling or home safety upgrades. We would also definitely talk about the Legal Aid Elder Service and even NGOs for further safety planning. And also try and sort of get her to touch base with her healthcare professionals, especially her GP. And if we do the GSAT that the police were talking about and she meets the threshold, then we'll upgrade her to our safety action meeting if she's been assessed at serious threat, or use our professional judgment if we think she needs that service further support. So some of the challenges that we do face though when supporting elderly clients are that most women we support are being cared for by immediate family members, such as their adult children and their adult male children who are living in the same home. So they can be hesitant to discuss the POI or related incidents and rarely report to police or support police involvement to not further implicate the POI. So they're quite reliant on them. And for some elderly clients who are in the home, they may not disclose the abuse as they're fearful that the POI will actually make them leave or put them in a facility. They're quite scared of that. So again, we always encourage her to report to police, but often it doesn't actually happen. What we'll do is we do work closely with the DDOs and they're very supportive and they'll actually give us information as we need. So sometimes we'll ask for further information. We may not always receive the narrative of the event, so we'll ask for that, and we'll also request if needed for them to conduct a wellbeing check, which is really important because we're only on having phone contact at this stage. So if we refer to our case study, we know that it didn't report to police, it was a neighbour, and this happens quite a lot. And if it's not a neighbour reporting to police, it's often another adult who isn't living in the home. And again, we always encourage her to keep in contact with safe family members as well. So some further challenges that we face can be when we speak with our clients, the POI can be present in the home, like Terry and Alana said, and this can also deter her from talking about the abuse. We also find when the client does not want to further implicate the POI, they won't provide consent to refer to any services, and in these cases we can't actually refer them anywhere. So hopefully we just try and get them to report to police and keep themselves safe. We also have to be mindful of, does the elderly client actually have capacity to receive service? And sometimes we can speak with a client who presents as articulate, but in fact is diagnosed with dementia or another mental health issue, and we're unaware of this because we've got the phone, we haven't got face-to-face, we're speaking on the phone. So sometimes what we'll do is we'll receive referrals, we receive referrals where the elderly client is in an aged care facility. And this is very difficult as well. Sometimes they don't actually have the capacity to talk to us at all. So what we usually do is we speak to like a director of the nursing care facility or a nurse and try and gauge where they're at and if they can actually speak with us. And like I said, 9 times out of 10 they cannot, they do not have the capacity. So nursing homes or facilities are quite transparent and usually give us updates as needed, and we just document that. So in conclusion, as most of our contacts are over the phone, it can sometimes be difficult to assess the situation of an elderly client regarding her risk, capacity, health concerns and actual risk from the POI. So if we are concerned with the immediate welfare of an elderly client, we will request a police welfare check, which always occurs, and we receive the relevant update. If we do receive consent, especially in Anita's case, we would refer her to the Legal Aid Elder Service for further support and assessment, particularly if there are diagnoses or mental health issues that we haven't been able to address or recognise during our initial contact. But I believe Mary will talk more about that. So that's it from me. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll just pop them in the comments and I'll be happy to address them later. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Nicole. That's a perfect introduction to Mary's Elder Abuse Service. So I am going to ask Mary, if you had received a referral from Nicole, how would you, or the DV-CAS, how would you start to work with this client? And how would your service as a whole start to work with this client?
Beautiful segue, Nicole, there. So my name's Mary Lovelock. I'm the Senior Solicitor of the Elder Abuse Service. The Elder Abuse Service assists older clients who live on the Central Coast and the Lower Hunter. By older, we mean over 65, or for our First Nations clients, it's over 50. And we provide them with a range of legal and social supports. I like the way we're kind of going from service to service. And what I talked about with Jenny and the other participants beforehand is that I like the way clients can come to us from any one of these services. So referral might start with the police, end up with me or Simone, but alternatively, they might start with Simone in the mental health service and then work their way up otherwise. And that just really acknowledges the many barriers that older people have in accessing services. And just by way of information, only I think less than 10% of our clients actually ring up our service and say, I'm experiencing elder abuse at the hands of my family. So 95% of our clients come to us through this network of key stakeholders. And, when I think about that, I think it just reflects the many barriers that older people have in speaking out about elder abuse. And this particular case study is such a, common presentation for us, because what it does, it highlights the tension between Anita wanting help for her son, seeing her son struggle. Once you're a parent, you're always a parent. And we see older people enduring, dreadful situations because they love their kids and they want to help their kids. And at the other side is Anita's right to feel safe and respected in her own home. So how do we bring those two together? So, our service adopts a human rights model. What does that mean? It just means that we put the client at the center of whatever, of every decision that's made by our service. And I think, and I always bang on about this, but we have social workers and lawyers working together, because sometimes the law can be a really blunt remedy. And the real things that create change in our older clients is unpicking those family dynamics that underpin elder abuse. And if we can do that, then we can incrementally see really positive changes for our clients. So we've got social workers providing social supports, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And we've got lawyers providing legal support. So for Anita, she'd come into our service and we'd be explaining, like the lawyers would be explaining to her what that ABO process is. I know it won't come as a surprise to Terry and Alana that sometimes clients don't tell you everything. And for many older people, they don't want to get police involved in their life. You know, they're ashamed, they're embarrassed, they're dependent sometimes on that adult son or adult daughter to provide care. You know, it's a very challenging and conflicting circumstance for them to be in, to be, you know, I mean, we want them to say to the police, tell the police everything, you know, tell them to get rid of that layabout son that's abusive to you. But, you know, that's kind of just a really blunt approach, and our experience is that it's not effective for an older person, that we need to take the time to understand what that older person's goals are to be able to really support them. So there's legal issues around, you know, the ABO process. Maybe, you know, she wants an ABO for her son to behave better, but she still wants her son to live with him because she still believes he's going to get better. If I can just provide that support to him, I can help him get over his drug issues. All the narratives that run through our clients' heads. There's issues in there around, you know, that he's taken things from her. What's that about? You know, as a lawyer, I'd be asking, tell me a little bit about who does your banking, you know, who looks after your finances for you. You know, you might be, you know, maybe she's appointed him as an enduring power of attorney. And if he's got drug and alcohol issues, we need to be talking to her about, well, there's alternatives. You can revoke that power of attorney. You can appoint somebody else. We can help you revoke that power of attorney. You know, what decisions have to be made for you? You know, you're probably familiar with the term guardianship. You know, sometimes older people appoint a guardian to make decisions for them around where they might live and healthcare. Is there a guardianship? Is Kevin's behaviour so poor that he's just not able to make good decisions for his mum anymore? It's a truth that, you know, I know Nicole will understand as well too, that sometimes we have to look at and support the perpetrator to be able to help the older person. So our service will be looking at, well, you know, Kevin's got this serious drug issue. Is he ready to sort of do something about that drug issue? Can we help Anita, by supporting Kevin? Can we get Kevin linked in with some drug and alcohol services? Can we link Kevin in with some, you know, mental health services? Is Kevin suffering carer stress? Can we link him in with, you know, carer support? So they're all the things that we would be kind of looking at in terms of what the legal issues are. And then there's all these social supports that our social workers would be looking at. One is that they'd be looking at, you know, what does Anita want? What are her short-term goals? What are her long-term goals? And how can we support her to achieve them? What services is she already linked in with? I mean, is she linked in with My Aged Care? What are her, you know, what are her existing support services? Are there other members of the family that can support her? What's Kevin actually doing as her carer to support her? Is he doing anything at all? Is there somebody else that should be her carer? Does she want to stay in the home? What are her needs now? But because, you know, I always say, if we're lucky, we're going to get old. And with getting old will come some decline in our physical ability, and sometimes we might need supports for that. So what are Anita's like physical needs now, and trying to get her to project forward in, say, 6 months or 12 months. So our social workers will be looking and speaking with Anita about, well, where do you want to be in 12 months' time? If you're thinking about making that transition to aged care, is now the time? So we'd be providing her with some advice around aged care options. Our lawyers, you know, can help you talk through what those steps are and sort of going into aged care. And Anita's talked about her mental health. She's in a particularly difficult situation now, but she's got a past history of depression, and the situation that she's experiencing at the moment would only be exacerbating that. So I know from my experience in working with clients that we get the best outcomes when we work together. And Simone from the mental health, older person's mental health service has been a tremendous support to our clients. And I would be reaching out to Simone and talking to her about whether Anita is a suitable referral to her service and how we might kind of work together to support Anita. So
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's right. Great segue. I do just want to highlight that I think one of the amazing things about your service is that all of your staff do have that real client focus and that holistic care. So your clients are never going to be forced to do something that they don't think is appropriate for their lifestyle. And there's that real listening, and particularly through the social workers that work with your team, but also the lawyers. No one is ever has to go down a path that they don't feel comfortable with. So we're going to have a chat to you now, Simone, with your social work perspective. If Mary's social workers or lawyers had identified that they thought that this client did have some mental health issues that perhaps hadn't been addressed elsewhere, if they referred to you, what kind of work would you be doing with that client?
Thanks, Jenny. So any referrals that come through to mental health will go through the mental health telephone access line. So Mary or one of the social workers would be doing that. They'd be making that referral via that central number. What happens then, it would then get allocated through to the team. So within our service, we see people over the age of 65 and Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people over 50. So like some of the other services who have got what is moderate to severe mental health issues. So particularly for Anita, if she had sort of newly developed depression or had become quite severe as a result of the stress from living with her son, she might be experiencing, some anxiety as well, is very common. Then what would happen is she'd come through our service, she'd get allocated to a care coordinator. So the care coordinator will work with her. It's approximately about 3 months that they'll work with a client, but it's really dependent on what they need. Some clients it's less than that, some is longer, depending on how they're managing and how they're working towards their recovery. So what the care coordinator will do is go out and do a mental health assessment, and will work with the client to develop recovery goals. So they're really client-centered goals. They're based on what the client's wishes are, what their choices are. So how referrals tend to come through to me. So my position is a fairly new one. I've been in the role for about 1.5 years. So I work alongside the care coordinators. So how it often works is that the care coordinators will go out and do their mental health assessment. From that, they might identify some red flags. They might just think, look, there's something not right here. I'm concerned about, the son or, some sort of relationships. Or in this case, when the referral comes through, it's part of that referral that there's been elder abuse or domestic violence identified at that referral point. So I would kind of get involved at that point once we were aware that there was elder abuse concerns. Generally, and with this case with Anita, as we would organise to go out and see her. And I know one of the questions before to Terry and Alana was, how do you do that if the son's there? So we've obviously got to be really mindful of that. We're a face-to-face service and we do home visits. So we would need to be making sure that it was safe for Anita for us to come out and see her in the home. Is there a time where her son may not be there that we could come out? Or do we need to organise to bring her into one of our clinics? Or do we... At other times I've booked a room at a healthcare centre and actually had clients come and see me there. So we've got to be really mindful of that, her safety, but it's also safety of staff. So we'd be doing a risk assessment, home a home risk assessment to identify any risks for the staff as well. So I guess in this case, we already, we've obviously got a lot of information already from the referral, because there's been various services involved, which is fantastic. So it's what we'd be doing when I go out, I'd be going out with the care coordinators. I would be conducting a really thorough psychosocial assessment. But prior to doing that, I would be ringing Mary or ringing one of the social workers at Legal Aid. I'd be wanting to sort of get some handover. We're not wanting to duplicate things. I think that's one thing I'm really mindful of with our older clients, is they often have, when they have a lot of services involved, it can become really overwhelming for them and they get really stressed and confused. So I want to make sure in this case I'm not duplicating. So I'd be wanting to really find out what support's already been offered, what information's already gathered. And again, we'd be doing a really thorough psychosocial assessment, so really similar to some things that Mary was talking about, and Nicole looking at, and the police as well, everyone looking at what her supports are. Obviously, there'd be a mental health assessment as part of that. What are her strengths? What things are working well for her? Has she got family involved? What services? All those things that previous services have talked about. What her wishes are as well, in terms of, I guess our goals are focusing around her mental health. One of the other things with our service is that we have got access to a psychiatrist or a psychiatric registrar. So we'd be looking at, does she need input from them? Is she on any medications for the depression? Does she need to be on medications? Do they need to be reviewed? And if we've got a client who is quite acutely mentally unwell or really at risk, so if a client was, for example, Anita was to sort of disclose any suicidal ideation or that she was at risk of self-harm, we'd be getting the doctors involved to review, does she need to be referred or come into an inpatient mental health setting as well. So I think the other thing Mary was mentioning is just that support that we would be looking at offering to Kevin as well. So the same with us, we'd be looking at what are his needs, can we engage drug and alcohol, has he had a previous involvement with them, those types of things. So I think that's, that kind of covers it. I guess in terms of referral pathways, I think Mary sort of mentioned this, it's quite often that when they come to mental health, most of the time they're not engaged with anyone else. They may not have ever disclosed any type of abuse. So we may be the first service that's actually had the opportunity for them to talk to safely about the concerns. So then I would, a part of our role is really about educating, like Terry and Alana were saying, around the abuse, that it is abuse, that it's not okay, they don't have to accept this, and then talking to them about the services. And I think, like other clinicians were saying, there are those barriers to them wanting to access support, and particularly legal support. They sort of think, I don't want to go to, I don't want to be taking, my son to court, and I don't want to get them into trouble. So I really try to talk about it in a way that accepting a referral is really about them being informed of what their options are, what choices can they make in this situation. It doesn't always mean you're having to take someone to court or contact the police, but what ways, it's about them making informed decisions about what action they want to take, and I think that's really important.
Thank you so much, Simone, and I think that's kind of the common theme that we've had today, is that it's really, this is the older person's life, and you need to listen to what they want and perhaps what they don't want as well. Have respect and give them that power over their own life, which they, might feel has been taken away from them previously. I know the time, and we've got about 15 minutes left to our webinar today. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody on the panel. We do have some questions which have come through, which is really great. Some of them we won't be able to address today, but we will be able to do that with some follow-up after this this webinar. So please don't feel that we haven't heard your questions. I do also want to note that a lot of the support services that we've heard from today on the panel, they are based in the Central Coast and Lower Hunter region. So their service may not necessarily be available in your region, because we do have people coming from a really large, some interstate, so a really large area. What we will be doing at the end of this webinar is sharing a slide which does have some support services contact numbers, which is statewide, and we can certainly contact anyone interstate as well with the relevant services available there. I also wanted to note, Vicky earlier did mention the Kimberley Birds resources. They are fabulous resources. We've had a look at those ourselves, and you can actually Google Kimberley Birds and you'll be able to access them online. I think we'll turn now. We are kind of coming to an end, so I'd like to address some of the questions that have come through, and I will ask certain panel members to perhaps give their input on that, but others can contribute as well. So one of the questions that we've had from an attendee has said, do any abused elderly people actually get help other than from loved ones? So I think this is an interesting question. Obviously, we've got support services here today who would say, yes, we're here, and we do feel that we're doing this kind of support work with people. One of the issues around this has come up through the elder abuse study that was released. It was commissioned by the Australian Attorney General and was released late last year. That study identified that 1 in 6 people that were surveyed had identified that they were a victim of elder abuse in the previous 12 months. So those stats are very high. Unfortunately, only 1 in 3 people who experience elder abuse seek help with it. So it really raises the importance of raising awareness of elder abuse, raising awareness of support services that are available to people. And, you know, part of today is, you know, that's part of the aim of today, to actually raise awareness of some of these issues. The following question from the same person has said that, where is the evidence that there is actual help leading directly to positive outcomes? And I think I'm going to ask Mary to answer this one initially, if you can. Can you give us some examples that you have seen where there's been real assistance for a client?
Yeah, well, look, just big picture, I'll say that in terms of like evolution, elder abuse is a long way behind domestic violence. You know, the past 15 or 20 years, domestic violence has made huge inroads, and people kind of know and easily recognise what domestic violence is. Elder abuse, it's still relatively new. I mean, and last year, Jenny referred to the prevalence study. That was the first big chunk of research that we had that could actually help inform our services. So it is a growing area. And I think the question sort of speaks to, you know, where's the evidence and research around what works? At the moment, we don't have that, you know, I don't have a research paper that I can point to. But what I can talk about is the work we do for our clients where we see really good outcomes. So we see older people who come to our service isolated, ashamed, without a voice, financially abused, separated from family, and through the work that we do in our service in collaboration with the stakeholders that are on this webinar today and others that aren't here, we see positive outcomes, which are reconnection with family, safety. That might mean they're not living with their abuser anymore. We've been able to evict the adult son or adult daughter from the home. It may be that they can no longer stay in the home safely and they have to make that transition to an aged care facility. So we see improved housing. We see reconnection to services. We see older people getting their being reimbursed from money that's been stolen from them by their adult children. Last week, we were able to recover $21,000 for an older person whose grandson had used that misspent that under a power of attorney. I got $800 back from an older client who'd been threatened and abused by a person that lived in the housing complex, same housing complex as her. We see people who have come to us and they say, I'm living in a granny flat out the back. I paid for the granny flat, but my daughter has told me I have to get out of the house next week. We regularly assist clients like that, where we are able to assert their legal right to remain in the home. And if they no longer want to remain in the home because it's unsafe for them, then we are able to get back the money that they put into that house so that they can use that to move on to somewhere else. So, I mean, I give you those stories because I think every one of those stories is a positive outcome for a client.
And I think that's really pertinent, because we do have a question here where someone has asked to what extent would the Elder Abuse Service get involved in a matter of financial abuse. And I think that your answers have answered that question. And I think also it's one of the most prevalent forms of elder abuse that a legal service will see. And that's unfortunately because it's pretty black and white. You know that when you open your bank statement and there's only 16 cents left in it, that something has gone wrong and that you need to get help with that. I think we're running out of time now for any more questions. So I just wanted to let you know that we're going to be printing out all of the questions that we've received throughout the webinar today, and we'll be able to respond directly to the people who have asked those questions. I'm going to let Deb wrap everything up, but I just want to say I think one of the takeaways that I've had from today is that collaboration is really the key for supporting all clients, but in particular older clients, because one service may not be able to solve all of the problems, but together, you know, the older people in our community can really get a lot of support. So thank you once again to everybody coming along. I'm going to hand over to Deb, and if it's all right, Deb, I'm going to get Bridget to put up our final slide, which does have some referral points to support services that people can jot down if they feel that they would like to use those. So thank you, Deb.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny, and thanks everyone for that really sort of interesting and informative session. And I think it demonstrates how interrelated the support system should be and can be. It doesn't always work fabulously all the time, but like people are always trying their best to make it work for the person involved. I'd just like to, you know, again, thank everyone for joining in, and those people who have attended as a participant. I'd also like to say for a number of you, there were some technical glitches in terms of links to the webinar, and there's some people I know who have possibly missed out on because of that. That's something that happened for us, and we tried to amend it. It didn't always work, but everyone who originally, just if you know people who weren't able to get on to this, let them know they will be followed up. All their emails, we have all their emails, so everyone will receive follow-up information regardless of whether they were able to attend today. And we won't do that again. We'll sort that one next time. Thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to Legal Aid for hosting this particular webinar, and that gives us the capacity to actually use it in the future, this webinar, because it's being recorded. And as I said earlier, we will be sending out further information and links, etc., for you all. And yeah, look, I think thank you very much, and I might just finalise by thanking all the presenters and finishing off saying have a good rest of the day and week and stay safe and well. Thank you.